Thanks, everybody. So I named my cat Coco after Coco Chanel because I wanted her to be a strong female. Well, Coco was strong, all right. She scratched me so much that one time a woman looked at my battered legs and asked me if I was into S&M. Coco was very demanding when she wanted something. Anytime she saw me cut open a cantaloupe, she'd go meow, meow, meow. She was like a fire alarm. I'd have to chop up the cantaloupe into tiny 1 millimeter slices and offer her a handful, then another handful until she was satisfied. Otherwise, Coco didn't seem to care too much about food. Every morning when I fed her a bowl of her kitty mix, she'd sniff it, take a few bites, then she'd stop and walk away. Usually she left her bowl half full. This amazed me. My cat had healthier eating habits than I did. I've been binging and purging ever since I was a teenager. My condition was so bad that I couldn't trust myself with food nearby. If a coworker brought in a box of donuts or a jar of M&Ms, I wouldn't be able to concentrate. At home, if there was a carton of ice cream in the fridge, I'd take a spoon and eat the entire thing while watching an episode of The Office. Then I'd go to the bathroom, pull my hair back, shove 2 fingers down my throat. Ice cream is pretty easy to throw up, especially if it's a smooth flavor like vanilla or caramel. Not so much if it's butter pecan or chocolate almond. The sharp edges of the nuts can hurt your throat. I was really good at hiding my habit. I'd polish the toilet until it shined. I'd go to the supermarket and buy a new carton of ice cream. And sometimes I'd crack open the new carton and eat just 1 or 2 spoonfuls to make it appear as if I'd had a sensible snack. So I kept this nasty secret from my parents, my brother, and everyone that I'd ever lived with. But one time, when my head was over the toilet, Coco pushed open the bathroom door and she looked at me with her big cat eyes. And I felt really dirty because I knew that she knew. And I knew that I had to do something. I was a fraud. On the outside, I looked healthy, but on the inside, I imagined my organs were ravaged. I read a self-help book that suggested that I look into a mirror and declare, I love myself. I tried it and I thought, that's awkward and corny. I saw a therapist and she told me that bulimia was about control, that it was my way of asserting control when things around me felt out of control. And that made me remember when all this started. I was a kid and I'd watched my brother fall into a deep depression and I couldn't do anything about it. And I asked my mother for help and she couldn't do anything about it. So that theory about control and lack of control made sense, but knowing that didn't really make me change, especially in 2020, when it felt like everything was going out of control and that the world was ending. My depressed, unemployed brother was now manic and running around like a COVID magnet. And I was worried about him more than ever because people who look like us were being blamed for the coronavirus. But when I called him, he said he'd prefer to text and that I shouldn't expect a response right away because he had important things to do. And I kept thinking about how good it would feel if I could just eat a bag of 3 Musketeers and a tub of coffee ice cream. But I couldn't because I was working from home. My fiance was working from home. We were always together. My secret would have been out. I logged into an Eating Disorders Anonymous group and I saw a man talk about how he chewed and chewed his food and then spit it into his napkin. When it was my turn to speak, I talked about my cat. By this time, Coco had died, but I was still inspired by her healthy approach to food. The moderator stopped me and said I was getting off topic. I grew frustrated. I went outside and did some yoga stretches. I recited, I love myself, I love myself. And saying this was easier when I didn't have to look into a mirror. And something in my mind clicked. I thought about my cat and how excited she got anytime she saw a cantaloupe. And I imagined making a mountain of tiny cantaloupe slices and then stuffing it down her throat. than making her vomit. That's disgusting, right? So why was I doing that to myself? If I truly loved myself like I had loved my cat, I wouldn't have subjected myself to this torture. I mean, I guess I had been into S&M all along. It didn't involve whips and chains, but ice cream and pie. A few weeks later, I started my own online group. I called it Table Tales, and every week, several people who had nothing better to do during the pandemic zoomed in to talk about food. I asked them, what was the most memorable meal that you've had? What did it look like? What did it smell like? Where were you? Then I helped people write their stories and publish them on a website. An accountant wrote about a fish that he'd caught as a young boy, and his mother cooked it until it was GBD, golden brown and delicious. A yoga teacher wrote about a chicken curry that a man made for her, and that's when she realized that she could love him. You know, through these stories, we celebrated food, and I realized that, you know, food wasn't just about nourishment, it was about people, sharing, joy, the complete opposite of what I'd been doing alone in secret. A little while later, I also taught my brother how to Zoom. And I saw that he had lost another tooth and that he was wearing 2 sweaters to keep himself warm. And I realized yet again that my mental health was tied to his mental health. And I couldn't do much to help him, but I did what I could. I listened. Next week, we Zoomed again, and I was so happy to see that he was logging in a few minutes early. And all those strong urges that I had of wanting to eat a big chocolate cake, a carton of ice cream, all of that became quiet. Nowadays, if I see a pie in the kitchen, maybe I'll eat 1 slice, maybe 2, but then I'll stop. I'll go on to do something else, just like Coco.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you.
So beautiful. Table Tales?
Yes.
If I'm muted, I have a couple of questions if it's okay.
Sure.
So, do you still have that group going, Table Tales?
I don't have the group going. We're not active, but the website is still up. You can see it at tabletales150.com. And the 150 is, it signifies 150 words. So each of the stories are exactly 150 words. And we're still taking submissions. So if you have good food stories about your favorite meal, a memorable meal, and you can write it in 150 words, I invite you to check out the website and submit.
I'm going to put, if it's okay with everyone's permission, usually afterwards in the event discussion, I put the tellers' names.
Awesome.
And link to something. Again, so I want to make sure I have it right. Tabletales150.com.
Yes.
Awesome. That's great. What a good idea. You know?
Thanks. It really healed me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It did. I found it to be a small miracle that during the pandemic, I made new friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like here.
Right. Also, I find it interesting, and we've had this conversation, I think, in other open mics like this in the past. That particular topic is so, I don't know how to say this, the ratio, like there's a lot of people who deal with it, but very rarely do we hear about it.
Oh, eating disorders? Yeah, it's
ratio,
a secret.
I don't know, right, like of all the things, like of many, some things there's a lot of it people deal with, but I feel like we hear more about it. That ratio seems, that's not the right word, but it's a common thing and not a common thing we hear about. That's the
yeah, I feel that too. Yeah, it's a dirty secret that a lot of people live with.
Yeah, I'm glad that you have the courage to talk about it and write stories about it. Yeah, cool. And I should have mentioned this. You can watch this. I'm going to spotlight people. I didn't spotlight Sasha, but you can manipulate, using gallery or speaker. And of course, you can communicate with the chat, which Sasha, people are sharing some of their thoughts with you. I hope you look at that. And if you came in late, just shoot me a message in the chat if you want to tell a story. Right now we have 7 storytellers, so we have room for 1 or 2 more. And if you said you didn't, and if you get inspired during and want to change your mind, by all means, that's great. And again, you can if it's okay, you'll let me know. The tellers will let us know if you want to stick around or can stick around, and maybe let us know if you want to talk about this stuff more. It's up to you. Yes, Skylar, of course. I'm going to put you at the number 8 spot, okay? And our next teller, the number 2 teller, is Barbara in the Midwest. I'm going to unmute you, and whenever you're ready. By the way, sorry, I'm only doing these for Ken because he wanted to. So just
Okay.
otherwise, you're on your own. Don't go too long. And if you want me to do that, I will, but I trust you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's really hot and sticky and humid in the Midwest today. So,
Ah,
but I'm not going to complain yet. My mother lies immobile in her nursing home bed, despite there being nothing wrong with her limbs or her nervous system. Because of vascular dementia, she's lost the ability to walk or move her arms as her brain does triage, prioritizing the dwindling blood flow and oxygen to the essentials like breathing, seeing, digesting. She's also exhausted from fighting dementia's inescapable gravity well, which pulls her mind further into darkness, dragging this lively, edgy, fiercely loving woman we've known away from 78 years of coherence and lucidity into its chaotic black hole of hallucinations. At the beginning of her descent, she's able to share these dreamlike visions, which she believes are completely true. In this twilight zone, she imagines her long dead father is still living, and my Uncle Dave, who is very much alive and has just visited her a week past, is dead. She sees bags of money lying at her feet in her hospital bed, and she excitedly whispers, "Barb, take the money. Take it home and put it in my safe." I wish. On another early visit, she asks me, "Whose horse is that standing behind your chair?" She also tells me she and the hotel's cook had a lovely conversation during their smoking break, though she's not in a hotel, has never met the nursing home's cook, and she hasn't smoked in 10 years. At the beginning of her descent, I am in denial about how irrevocable the changes in her brain are and have yet to learn the pointlessness of correcting her delusions. I still believe by confronting them, it will at least keep her on dementia's event horizon and not become sucked down into mental oblivion so quickly. But the nursing staff gently convinces me that there is no road back to normalcy and I should spend as much time with her as possible. Now, mom's mind periodically rises up from confusion and bivouacs on a tenuous ledge of lucidity, usually right after a scary plunge down into several days of further physical and mental decline. But each time she rallies, the plateaus are lower than the one before and of shorter duration. And the next decline is deeper and longer than the one before it. But a year into her stay and about 6 months before her death, she spends most of her time in a near constant state of sleep, of unconsciousness. She's eating and drinking less as time passes, but there are some bright spots. There's a wonderful Polish immigrant nurse's aide named Casey, who is able to coax my mother to eat more than the other aides with, "Oh, come on, my darling, eat for me." Mom beams whenever Casey's cheery self enters her room, as she does when Lewis, a middle-aged African-American aide, dances and sings his way into her room. "How's my beautiful Eileen doing today?" is how he always greets her. He takes great pride in the care he gives Mom and the other residents. She is on hospice care and has been since a month after being admitted for her shower fall. The hospice volunteers and I communicate mostly through a notebook kept at her bedstand where we write how Mom is or isn't doing better or worse. They tell me it's comforting to those who are dying to have permission to go, to die from their loved ones, that many linger because they're worried about the pain and trauma their passing is going to cause their loved ones. I decide to do this, but I'm hoping for another tiny rally where she will be somewhat lucid and communicative. And about a month before her death, she finds her way back from another slide down the gravity well. I call my older brother, Rick, tell him this rally may be her last, and he flies in the next day from his home in LA to stay for a few days and to see his mother for a last time. Well, moms always love surprises, so I keep his upcoming visit a secret. And when we enter the room, her reaction at seeing Rick is unexpected. She looks confused and a little horrified. I think she's not sure whether he's real or a hallucination. Maybe she's afraid he's dead. She has been talking lately, sometimes arguing with people only she can see over the last few months. To reassure her that Rick is really there, I say, "Look who's flown in to visit you, Ma, your gorgeous son." She looks relieved and smiles. And Rick has never been prosperous, and Mom often funds his trips to visit. So when she wryly asks, "Yeah, who paid?" Rick and I laugh, feeling joyful because this cheeky woman is totally recognizable as our mother. And we all know it will be our last time we share a family in joke. A few days later, after Rick has flown home, I'm trimming her nails and we're watching our afternoon show, Jeopardy. I sense now is the time to let her know that while we love her, she has our blessing if she's ready to leave. And suddenly I'm flooded with an irrational but instinctive fear of abandonment. Like a living Matryoshka doll, the small, vulnerable child pops out from inside me to rebel against this unnatural idea that it's okay to tell her mother she has her blessing to die, to leave her forever. This rush of vestigial childlike fear is unexpected, and it takes me a moment to reorient myself into adulthood and find my way back into my adult skin. I look at Mom, not knowing exactly what I'm going to say. And I know I must say the most difficult thing. Mom, I've got something to say. And it is the most difficult thing I've ever had to say. So I'm only going to say it once. She looks at me with complete and calm attention. It's like, "I love you. Rick loves you. Your sister loves you. But if you're ready to go, because I can't say the word die, it's okay. We'll miss you and love you forever, but we will be okay." She wears a quiet, peaceful look that tells me she understands. And we go back to casual conversation, watching Jeopardy. And 2 weeks later, a half hour before my usual morning visit, the nursing home calls to tell me Mom has died. It's an unbearably beautiful, sunny July day that at first seems jarring and incongruent with her death and my grief. But then I think my mother's death released her bright spirit from the darkness of dementia. And it is this that is being reflected back to me in this gorgeous day. And I now like to imagine that she looked out her window at that shiny morning and, freed from her earthly worries about my brother and me, thought, "This is a good day to die." And so she did. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara.
Mm.
You all right?
I'm fine.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of, oh my God. Today's the anniversary of her death.
Wow.
I mean, I think that that's why this was really on my mind, I mean, I just like, oh my God, it was July 25th,
When was that? What year?
2005.
Mhm. Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's why it kind of hit me more than, I mean, I just realized that today is the anniversary of her death. So 16 years.
It's a nice tribute.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you've worked at, I know, a similar story, and you did that at a 99 or a version of that, right?
I excerpted
Right.
one of the stories for the 99 seconds. Yeah. And this is the full version.
Yeah, usually people take something from a larger story.
Yeah.
I have this thing where we have a slam, and it's just for 99 second stories. It's really fun, and it's really
Yeah,
hard.
it is.
It's really hard because stories are hard in that short of time. But it might be up Sasha's alley, given what you shared about the 150.
Yeah, if I might say, I've been telling everybody since I stumbled on your 90, it is fun.
It is fun.
It is fun. It is a really good exercise at, you can tell a beginning, middle, and end story well in 99 seconds. It's incredibly skill building. I mean, I just really, really love it. So
Yeah. I think it is. I've been astounded. Actually, our anniversary, our grand slam is in a few weeks, and that's our 1 year, or almost one, short of 1 day of our first one. that we did back in August. So it's been really cool. Anyway, yeah. All right. Thanks again, Barbara. Appreciate it. I hope you don't get too hot there and sounds like you're on air conditioned.
Oh, I'm just staying in the air conditioning. I was out for a while and I went,
Yeah. As well, I'm in North Carolina. Anyone here who's from NC, that's how we roll. NC air conditioning.
Yeah, well, that's why I didn't want to complain. I thought you're in North Carolina.
Yeah, whatever. I'm in air conditioning. It's fine. From my air conditioned car to my air conditioned house. All right, cool. Mr. Ken Stockton up in the great state of Michigan.
Okay.
Take your time, sir. We're looking forward to hearing you.
Okay, Sean. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell the story. So I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, and I was brought up in a family where the father had serious mental health problems, pretty much lifelong. So when I was about 10 years old, apparently he started showing some disturbing behavior, which I think was a combination of heavy duty sleep and then occasional high energy and, very energized, kind of indecisive ad hoc behavior, unlike the way he normally behaved. So now, granted, this was in the 50s, so he went to the family physician, and the diagnosis at that point was sleeping sickness, which is pretty bizarre, right? So there was really no treatment given to him. That was the diagnosis. And then his behavior became much more erratic and much more high energy. So, and then eventually, I come to find out back, probably 60s and 70s, this was called manic depression. And of course, now it's called bipolar. So for me, as a 10-year-old, I didn't really understand what was going on. In fact, there was some element of his behavior that was pretty enjoyable for me. For example, he would, in his sleepless nights, maybe wake me up at 1 o'clock in the morning and take me to the YMCA, which was 24/7, and we'd go swimming, or we would play basketball, or he would go to my school, Joseph Stokes Elementary School, Trenton, New Jersey, sign me out and take me out to do something, something crazy. And one of the memorable incidents I remember was he took me to lunch, which in the past, he never took me to lunch, or, this was not part of the family. He was working class, worked in a factory. Also, he stopped going to work regularly. He would go to work a little bit, come home, go to the Y, whatever. So he took me to lunch, and we ate a lot of food, and then he started interacting with one of the wait staff, and he told her that he was very strong and very physically fit. He proceeded to get on the floor of the dining room, and I tell you no lie, he did 100 push-ups. And in the meantime, I see the wait staff going like this, which I didn't really understand exactly what that meant, but I came to understand that that meant your father is really crazy. And we had very limited income. We lived in an 800 square foot row house in Trenton, New Jersey. And he started, unrelenting excessive spending. There were a couple days where every day he came home with a new used car. And my mother would say, Tom, you got to take this back. We can't have this car. So it really became extreme. One of the interesting things that he did was he was a harmonica player. He played the harmonica during World War II, and it was self-learned, and he loved to play the harmonica. And he decided that we were going to try out for Ted Mack in the original amateur hour. And for those of you who are not at an advanced age like me, Ted Mack had a radio show, which was a talent competition. Then it became a TV show, and it was really the 1950s precursor of America's Got Talent. So he gets me out of school. We drive to New York City, and we auditioned for Ted Mack in the original Amateur Hour. He plays the harmonica. I play the flutophone, which is kind of this primitive elementary school instrument. And about a couple of weeks later, they called and we had passed the audition. We were going to be on Ted Mack. The only problem was we couldn't go because by that time, my father was an inpatient at Trenton Psychiatric Hospital in Trenton, New Jersey, literally 3/4 of a mile from my house. What happened a few days before Christmas, my father convinced all of us in the family, my mother, my older brother, that, quote, somebody was after him, right? So he made us turn off all the lights in the house. It was about 7 or 8 o'clock. He made us go under the bed in the master bedroom. He had a candle, which wasn't particularly safe. We're under the bed with a candle. And as a 10-year-old, I still don't understand. And you believe your father. I believe him. Somebody's after my father. We have to turn out the lights. So finally, my mother understands that this is a serious problem and we're all at risk. And she calls the state police. The state police come, two in a squad car. They get my father. He is extraordinarily manic and strong. He overpowers the 2 state troopers. So they call for backup. 2 more state troopers come. The bottom line is, as a 10-year-old, I observed my father being dragged out of the house by 4 state troopers. And I have a memory. I think they put him in a straitjacket. I think they handcuffed him and had him in a straitjacket. They drove him 3/4 of a mile up to Trenton Psychiatric. The context of Trenton Psychiatric Hospital was it was founded in 1848 by Dorothea Dix, who was an early advocate for mental health care. And she was very advanced, and this hospital was founded in 1848. However, the first superintendent at Psychiatric Hospital was a guy by the name of Dr. Cotton, and his belief about mental illness was that it was caused by systemic infections, usually of stomach things. So he actually would take patients, drag them into the operating room, take out their colons, take out their gallbladders, remove limbs, and the fatality rate, and this was going on from about 1910 to about 1930. When my father was admitted in the late 50s, early 60s, there were 4,000 patients. And it still was a house of horrors, right? So my brother would not, and we had the ability to visit my father after about 3 weeks in the psychiatric hospital. And I agreed to go because I really miss my father. My brother wouldn't go, he was too fearful. And it was a scary place. I mean, it was a park-like setting and these beautiful architectural gems of buildings, but there were about 4,500 patients. When you walked past the buildings, the windows had bars on them. There were many human beings hanging out the windows as we walked by, begging for money, cigarettes, and whatever. When you walked into the ward, it truly was a scene out of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They painted the walls sort of army green. My father was dressed in green, like a jumpsuit. Everybody was dressed in green. There was heavy smoking. And my father stayed there for 3 months and he was administered electroshock treatment. And it was the primitive electroshock treatment, which is painful and horrible and whatever. And I can remember visiting my father on Sunday. You were allowed to visit him on Sunday for 2 or 3 hours. And it was scary because he was disengaged. His affect was real low and slow, and it was scary. Now, the good news is that many patients who were admitted to Trenton Psychiatric never got out, or they never got out alive, right? He got out, and the other good thing was he never lost his job. But there was a reason he never lost his job, and that's because he had an inside connection to somebody in the ownership of the company. And it was Fetter's Air Conditioning, which was the first corporation in America manufacturing air conditioning. And okay, I'm coming close to the end, but whatever the case is, the good news is he got out and then He continued to work, and he had a few more manic episodes. He was mostly moderately depressed most of his life. He had a few more manic episodes, but and he lived a long life. He lived till he was 90. And as he got older, the psychotropic medications were then used more frequently. He got on lithium and he was much more balanced. And so when I look at that experience, it probably was one of the biggest traumas of my life. But what I learned from it, and also, by the way, there was a lot of shame when in those days, and there probably still is, when there's a family member that has mental illness. And so the person with mental illness is either blamed, or the family is blamed, or you cover it up. And I remember there was a neighbor in the neighborhood who was a train conductor, and he threw some passenger off the train and ended up in jail for 4 months. And they were very shameful about that. My family was shameful about it. But at any rate, so the lesson for me, some of the life lessons for me is that, first of all, when you have a person with serious mental health issues in your family, it's contagious. That trauma is contagious. And we all suffered tremendously for decades as a result of having a mental health issue in our family, right? It was not to be diminished. I think the other lesson that I learned is that my father was dealt a very terrible hand in life, not through his own, I mean, it was either genetic or maybe it was, who knows, nature, whatever the case. He had a serious health problem. And I look back and I think to myself, well, did he do the best he could do under the circumstances? And my answer to that is yes. I feel comfortable about saying yes. And then the other thing, the one final aside is, in my life, I've had personal trauma as well. And I think it might be related to my father's mental health problem. I was targeted by my Little League baseball coach, who was a serial sexual predator in Trenton, New Jersey. And I was sexually assaulted, raped 400 times between the alleged ages of 11 and 14. And I really believe that this serial predator was aware of the issues in our family and understood how vulnerable I was. And that's why maybe a major reason why I became a victim of sexual assault. And so the trauma continues, and trauma is contagious. And so the experience with my father and the experience as an assault victim has tremendously impacted my life. I'm glad to be alive at age 72, but trauma is contagious. And the more we can do to have empathy and compassion and understanding of people who've been traumatized or people who have mental health issues, the better we all will be. Communities, families, partners of survivors and trauma victims. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. That's a hell of a story, man. Damn. Thanks for sharing that. I was just talking to my sister a couple weeks ago about this place called Pilgrim State. If you're from Long Island, you might know of it. And it was not far from where we grew up. And it's closed. I don't know when it closed. It's been decades. I think those kinds of places, it sounds like it might have been similar to your dad's place in Trenton.
Absolutely.
I think the trend is they closed them.
Yes.
I don't know. I in my own experience with mental health, I'm not sure if it's gotten better. Some things I clearly have, but those sort of big box places, I think, are mostly done.
Right. Well, the deinstitutionalization movement was done pretty effectively for developmentally disabled people. Not so much from, a lot of those people are in jail.
I know.
A lot of people are incarcerated and they're not getting 100% appropriate mental health services. And their criminal behavior was as the result of mental illness.
This is a longer conversation, but I have noticed the narrative. We're pretty punitive here in this country. It's not a knock on the country, but we are rather punitive. And I noticed the mental health narrative is, well, they've got a mental illness, show them love, empathy, support, until they do a crime. Then fuck them, you're a felon. And it just, boom, it switches and we don't care.
Right.
And throw them in jail. And I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, wow, okay. That, and there's nuance, right? We're not suggesting it's okay to do a crime. Of course not.
Right.
But there's
Right.
factors, there's reasons. They're not well, they're not getting help, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Thanks
can
for
tell you some stories. I can tell you some stories out here about people who did minor crimes in the midst of manic episodes who served many months in jail inappropriately.
And obviously that does not help their mental health.
Right.
All right, ma'am. Thanks again. All these stories are bridges to larger conversations for sure. So I really appreciate it. All right, Mr. Jim in Tampa. I'm going to unmute you, and looking forward to hearing your story, sir.
Thank you, Sean. I was in my early career. It was the 1960s, and I was totally ill-equipped to deal with this fellow that had just been introduced to me. I was a daytime computer operator for a company in upstate New York, and the department had brought a fellow in. His name was Herman. Herman was about 10 years older than I am, and he was this hotshot computer programmer that they had hired out of some company in Manhattan. And, I got to know Herman because back then, computer programmers would spend the day bringing their programs into the computer room. I'd run them. Usually the programs would blow up and they'd produce reams and reams of big 11 by 17 fanfold paper that the programmer would then take back to their desk and spend hours going through it, trying to figure out what instruction was wrong or, what caused the program to blow up. And the first day on a job, I just watched Herman. He seemed like a pretty smart guy, but seemed troubled to me. And I wasn't exactly sure what that was about. The second day, Herman started to open up a little bit. And he explained to me that week, his family was being moved from Brooklyn and that they were looking for and seemed to have found a little farmette a few miles away from our business that was on a sloping hillside overlooking one of the Finger Lakes. And he said he was kind of excited, but really very apprehensive about the move. I said, well, it sounds like a lovely setting. He said, well, it's just my wife and my son and me. But I got to tell you, I'm incredibly nervous and unsure about it. And you could just sense the anxiety in his voice. And I said, well, what's the move been like for you? He said, well, moving from Brooklyn to rural upstate is traumatic, and probably more traumatic for me than my wife and my son. I mean, we're used to, if I have to go anywhere, I just jump on the subway and I'm at work. If we need to shop, all the shops are within a block or two walking distance in Brooklyn. My son goes to school 3 doors down from where our apartment is, and our temple is just around the corner. He said, I don't feel comfortable making this move, even though, I had to from a career standpoint, but, will we even be accepted? Well, I'm a computer operator. I have no training in psychology or dealing with people. I'm a geek. And so I said, well, thanks for sharing that with me. What do you see happening in the next couple of days? He said, Well, tomorrow the move should be over. I guess we're getting our furniture and everything delivered today. My wife is taking Eli, our son, to the local school and getting him enrolled. Um, uh, I, I don't know how the family is going to deal with it. And are they going to blame me for this? Well, the end of the day came and Herman left, and he, walked out to the parking lot with me, and he said, I'm not even comfortable driving. I've never had to drive in the city before. I just got a car, and I mean, I know how to drive, but um, you know, this is all strange and unfamiliar to me. I said, well, just take it easy, and tomorrow let me know when you come in how it went. He said, okay, I'll do that. The following morning, Eli comes in and he's got a grin from ear to ear. And I said, Herman, what was uh, what was it like when you got home last night? He said, you're gonna love this. Um, let me tell you about getting Eli into school. He used to go to a 3-story brick school by where we lived. The only school in Erin is a 2-room schoolhouse where they have the first and fourth grades in one room and the other grades in the other room. And there's 2 teachers. Well, that's got to be kind of a change. He said, oh, well, that's only part of it. The teacher, seeing Eli is a new student in class, of course, asked him to stand up in front of the class and said, tell a little bit about, well, where's your family from and what's your daddy do? That was back in the days when wives typically didn't work outside of the house. And Eli remembered all the nights that I brought these great big huge printouts home to work on over the dining room table. He got up and he said, well, my daddy, he goes to work every day and his job's pretty much finding bugs in dumps. The teacher was horrified. Her jaw dropped. The kids looked at each other like, oh my gosh, where'd this kid come from? The teacher gave the class a recess, went across the hall to the other teacher, who was a headmistress, told her about this obvious impoverished family that had just moved into the community. The headmistress was married to the Methodist pastor. She got on the phone to her husband. Her husband got on the phone to the Grange ladies. Now, if you know anything about rural communities, the Grange is like the special forces of the neighborhood. These are the people that will cook, clean, fix anything, find anything. Once you mobilize them, it's like sending in the infantry. Herman is driving home and he's heading up this 2-lane road and he's noticing there's a lot of traffic on the road and he thinks, well, this is a rural community. What the heck is all this traffic coming from? And the traffic pulls off the paved road onto a dirt road, which happens to be the same dirt road that leads to the farmette that the family was just moving into. And off the dirt road, they turn down a driveway, which happens to be the driveway that leads to their house. And now he's starting to get really anxious, more anxious than he was during the day, about what the heck is going on here. Has there been an accident? This is before cell phones. And the phone hadn't been hooked up in the house yet. And there's all these cars and pickup trucks and even a couple of tractors in the front yard of the house. And Herman jumps out of his car and he runs up the front steps, stumbling and almost falling, goes through the front, and the house is full of people. There must be 30 people in there milling about. And he goes looking for his wife and he can't find her anywhere. And now he's really panicking. And he pushes his way through the kitchen and then sees her standing on the back porch. He bursts through the door, grabs his wife. He said, "What's going on? Is everything okay?" And she said, "Relax." I was surprised as well. Apparently, something Eli said in class today set the expectation that we were an impoverished family and that, we couldn't support ourselves. And these good people showed up with blankets and feed for our animals and food for us and every kind of assistance you can imagine. And that man over there, the pastor of the Methodist Church, he has been so kind, wanting to know if there's anything the community can do, that we're here for them. And then the teacher came over and explained what Eli had shared with the class that day. And Herman started laughing. He said, "Oh, folks, I've got a very good job. I work with computers." Of course, nobody knew what big computers were back in the 60s. And yes, I do find bugs in dumps. Dumps are computer printouts with computer instructions, and that's where I spend most of my day. I'm not out sifting through a landfill. Believe me, we're fine, and we really so much appreciate you. And from that experience, Herman, his wife, and Eli found in one afternoon an outpouring of such love and acceptance far greater than they ever could have imagined. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Great job. Thanks, ma'am. That is a photo behind you. Yes, you are not actually in front of a lake.
Actually, I'm on a lake right now that's got 4 active gators in it.
Okay.
And when they get to be a nuisance, trying to climb over the fences and into our yards, they usually have a trapper come in and take them off. But yeah, we've got snakes and gators and all the other fun things that come with living in Florida.
Yeah. God, I went to the University of Florida, by the way, back in the day. So I know the state pretty well. Appreciate your story. Thanks again. Let us move on to, I have remembered. Julianne, where are you? I'm going to stop recording for a few moments. And I'm going to welcome my friend Linda in West Virginia, who is great and always tells, let me hang on a sec, Linda. I'm going to remove Julianne's spotlight. And the stage is yours, young lady.
Well, first I want to say, in honor of you always going sleeveless, I decided to to do it with you. All right, give me just a minute here to catch my breath and do my story. His house is in Asheville, North Carolina, and it burned to the ground. It was just a charred black cinder. My son Dustin lost everything: his car, furniture, clothes, food, dishes, musical instruments, drum set, and his 2 beloved cats. An ambulance whisked him away, and he went to the burn center in Wake Forest. They told him on the way he might die before they even got that 2-hour trip and got him in the hospital. He had inhaled so much toxic smoke that the inside of his lungs were black. I got a message the next day that all this was going on. He wasn't in any condition to call me, and so I'm the one that got a message. Yeah, I'm his mother. I called his charge nurse. She gave me the full details, all the meds he was taking, what his plan of care was, his prognosis, which didn't really sound good. And he was there for many, many, many days. Eventually, he started doing better, little bit by little bit every day. And then I got a message from his nurse that they would release him, but only if there was somebody that was going to take care of him, somebody that was going to see that he had food, somebody that had a clean environment, almost antiseptic, somebody that was going to assist him with everything, transportation back and forth to the burn center or a nearby doctor. I'm the mom. I said, I'm going to do this. I love my son. I'm doing it. So the doctors and nurses told us that he faced numerous dire issues. There was a lot of trauma and it was going to be really, really difficult. It wasn't going to be easy. Number one, infections. And that's the worst thing they said. People that have such extensive burns on their body, and 1/3 of his body had 3rd-degree burns, they faced the wrath of deep, painful infections. Weight loss. They said that his body was going to take every bit of nutrients to try to rebuild skin and heal everything that he had lost. And then they said if he made it through all of that, he probably would have to have skin grafts because he didn't have any skin left on the top of his head. So he was swathed up in gauze and wrappings, silver infused rubber mats draped on him. I'd never heard of this before, but it is something that they do to treat burn patients. He was dripping with anti-infection ointments. I mean, he just looked greasy. It was just all over him. I gathered him, his medical supplies in North Carolina, and I drove him 8 hours to my West Virginia house. I was going to be his caretaker, his nurse, his purse, his mother, his cook. I was going to do everything I could to help him heal, surround him with love. Most of the ride back, he was sedated and he was curled up with pillows, cuddling him in the back seat. Just before we left Asheville, the local ASPCA had collected his kitty's remains and we were supposed to go by and pick them up. They had them in a carton and they'd been in the freezer. I stopped, I ran in the building. They handed me a frozen box with their little bodies. I didn't open it. I didn't want to see them. We stopped for gas on the way back, several times actually. When I slammed the door shut, he jumped up. He was startled and he screamed. He was having a nightmare. He thought he was back in the house and the ceiling was crashing in on him. And that's the way it was to be for the next 2 months. Every little sound, every smell, just me turning on the gas stove would send him into a rage, crying, screaming. I had a comfy futon set up in the spare bedroom, and I thought this would be something low to the ground. He could easily roll in and out. He was near the bathroom. But Dustin said it was too hard, and it made his burns feel like they were just ripping and searing, and he couldn't sleep on it. He decided the most comfortable place was a foam mattress that we rolled out on the living room floor. He didn't want sheets. He didn't want blankets. He didn't want anything touching him. And he lay there day after day, screaming and crying. My German Shepherd, who's usually my best friend and my constant companion, abandoned me. She laid down beside him. She wouldn't take her eyes off of him. If his breathing slowed down too much, she shoved her big wet nose on the only spot on his body that was uncovered and didn't have a burn. And that was under his chin, right there on his neck. We put the box of kitties in my freezers. After a few days, he felt stronger. He wanted to take them out. He wanted to take him to the family farm. He wanted to bury him and have a proper funeral. I thought that would be a good thing, maybe help him heal. So I left him alone on the back porch so he could open the box and cry and grieve, and then we could go to the farm. Instead, he screamed, God, awful, bloody. I thought somebody was murdering him. The animal control officer at the center in Asheville had put a headless cat in that box, not his two beloved kitties. So after many phone calls, it turns out this was a cat that they had tested for rabies, and they'd mixed up the cat carcasses. Oh, I was one really pissed off mama bear. I took out all of our anger, our frustration, everything on that center director. I'm sorry, I did, poor lady. My son had gone through enough, but more was on the way. Nights and months of screaming, crying, torture. Burns are the most painful thing a human can endure ever. The wounds had to be scraped, disinfected, scrubbed, then rewrapped twice a day. Twice a day. There were parts of his body he couldn't reach, and I had to do it. I had to help him. That was probably the worst thing I've ever gone through, watching my son suffer, and there wasn't anything I could do. I cried every night when I went to bed when he couldn't see me. Oh, I didn't want to burden him with my emotional pain. He was dealing with enough. But any food he wanted, anything and everything I could remember he loved when he was a little boy, he was going to get it. I cooked it. Lasagna, he had lasagna every other day. Meatloaf, spicy like he liked it, he got that. Homemade bread, yep. Blueberry cheesecake, everything my son wanted. My kitchen was a nonstop restaurant, the food just rolling in and out and churning. Whatever delicacy I could conjure up, he was going to get it. Several months go by. On the second trip back to the burn center, we pulled in the parking deck. He asked me to let him go in by himself. I said, okay. I mean, he's a grown-ass man. He needed to start doing some things on his own. That was hard. I had to swallow real hard and say, okay, I'm going to sit here. I'll wait. So I watched him shuffle across the asphalt. He looked like a mummy, dragging his wrappings like he just emerged from a tomb. 2 hours later, he hobbled back. He slumped in the seat. Oh no, I thought. Not good news. I thought he was doing so good. His appetite was great. He was using less pain meds. He didn't seem to have any infections. He sat down. And then he grinned like a Cheshire cat. Oh, my little charming boy was coming back. He had improved so much they released him. He didn't need skin grafts. His skin had grown back. Miraculously, it had grown back. No infections. He was going to have some scars. And thanks to Mom's loving care and homegrown food and piles of fattening desserts, he'd gained 30 pounds. Boom.
Boom. Thanks, Linda. Yeah. Check the chat. Wow, that's also another. That's another thing we don't hear much about, whether it's in story form or other. At least I don't. Burn victims. I don't hear much about that. And I know it's not uncommon. Yeah.
It is. It's suffering, and it's emotional and mental, but also physical.
Yeah.
And everybody around him, suffers with him. It's really, really hard to watch somebody that you love have to go through all of that and find that road to healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good mama. Yeah. Cool. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. Our Jalissa, I think, is not here. So I'm going to hop over to Skyler. Are you with us, Skyler? There she is.
Yes, I am.
I'm going to spotlight you, Skyler, and then whenever you're ready, we'd love to hear your story, okay?
Okay.
Hang on
I
one
wasn't really
sec for
prepared
me.
for this,
One
so
sec. Here we go.
so this is what I got. So the world. I'll start off with a poem, and I wrote this poem.
Hang on,
when I was
Skylar.
little.
Skylar, real quick. Make sure that you're a little closer so we can hear you. It's a little hard to hear you right now. So I don't know if you can move a little closer to your computer. Yeah, whatever's comfortable. Yeah. Just so I want to be able to hear. We want to be able to hear what you have to say. Yeah. Great.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
That's a little better. Yeah.
Okay. So on December the 8th of 2019 is when my world changed. On that fateful day, I became another person by the stuff that happened to me. There's this swift pain that entered my brain. It was unlike anything else. And I started to hear the mirror. And they would say lies and manipulation constantly every day. It didn't take long until I got brought to this and told me that that's schizophrenia, and that's what I have. I was 24, and I knew that I couldn't handle it. It was too much for me, too much for anybody to always feel like you're getting picked on by this strange, ominous thing that's lurking on your shoulder. Anything I would say, anything I would do, they would tell me all the worst things. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. I knew I couldn't. I could barely think, I could barely speak. And it was 2 weeks later that this horrible pressure that was building up on my head finally gave. And this pop happened. A pop that I would never forget. I felt like my mind splitting. Later, I would learn that schizophrenia is a Greek word that means phrenia, schizite meaning to split, and phrenia meaning to mind. So I think what happens is that a person's mind does split. And after that, I lost my cognitive ability to read and write. It took me a while, it took me 3 months to gain it back. But I had a child, and I couldn't take care of him. I couldn't. So I sent him with his dad to live far away where I would not bring them down, or they wouldn't have to see me in that state. So that's what they did, and I stayed at my parents' house for about 6 months. I was there. I would try to see him sometimes, but I wasn't ready to. I couldn't explain. I didn't have any handle on it. It wasn't until the 5th time I went to the hospital, I decided that I was going to do something. I was going to change it. I was going to theorize something and figure this out. And I learned to write really well because I got really frustrated that I couldn't read or write. So I grabbed a dictionary and I wrote every single word in that dictionary until I wouldn't shake and I wouldn't stumble and I wouldn't stutter with my words and I could speak fluently again. And then I knew I was ready. I was ready to go see my family again. So they moved out to Illinois and I came and visited them. I wasn't completely healthy then. I was still going on about nonsense that nobody would understand, stories that nobody would ever believe, and would never give me the time to explain. So I decided that I would write a book. So every day I would write away. I didn't have a computer. I was broker than a joke. And I filled pages after notebooks up. And then my friend saw that I needed something. She gave me her laptop. And that would change my world. Every day I was spent writing away. And I drove myself insane again. I did that because I wouldn't stop writing. I just wanted to tell everything. I wanted to explain it all. I wanted to theorize it all. I knew that there had to be something that nobody thought of, nobody can explain, which quantum physics I actually understood, explained it really well. But it would take me a lifetime to do that. And then I went to a hospital again because I wasn't really ready. I wasn't eating, I wasn't drinking, I was just typing all day. And when I finally got out, they gave me new medicine. And this medicine was not good. It was benzos. And they thought it would help me sleep and go to rest, but it put me in a state of depression and it nearly ended my life. I went to the hospital again. And that time I knew I would have conquered my demons. I knew I had to. And I was like, that's enough. I had to learn patience with myself and patience with others. And then I discovered that I can allot my time better. And I discovered another coping skill, which was drawing. I realized drawing wouldn't put me in a fit at things. And then every day I would draw. I would draw 3 pictures a day. I would draw away and I realized that the voices would disappear when I draw. They would disappear from my life. And then in 4 months, I filled my kitchen wall with painting after drawing. And I figured that art was the cure all. And they now leave me at bay. Though they come and I hear them every night, but it's not like it used to be. And I'm glad that I'm alive every day. I wasn't really prepared to explain my story, and there's a lot I need to explain, but I ended up writing a full book about it to do said that. And what I wanted to convey was that coping skills was the best way for me to gain my sanity back, for me not to be in my own head, for me to regain myself and love myself again, because I realized I was able to do stuff. I wasn't just a disabled person now. I wasn't just crazy. I was an artist. I was a writer. I was able to do things, and that gave me hope to live again. That inspired me that every day I can draw a pretty picture and I will live on. And it might be sad, it might be silly, they're just doodles for now, but there's something that it helps me get through my day. And I'm really glad that I learned and I was determined to learn. And I may never get to figure out why I hear them, why only a select few do. But the day might come that I do, and my theories might explain it. But I work every day to talk and go to group, and going to group helps. And I've been out of the hospital for, which is my record right now, for 5 months. And I'm so happy for myself, because almost every month and a half I would have a meltdown and go to the hospital. And it's been 5 months now. And I'm so happy that I'm out and I do really well. Like, I can't work because, I just can't work. But hopefully one day I can figure out another way to make money. I still get nervous speaking. I'm much more fluent writing, but this was the best I got. So thank you.